Welcome to a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, a new day in America. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. The nation has sworn in its 46th president. Here is now President Joe Biden taking the oath of office with Supreme Court Justice John Roberts.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
President Biden's inaugural address pleaded for unity amidst one of the most divisive political climates in American history. He pledged his allegiance to all Americans in confronting the very real challenges the country is facing right now, starting, of course, with the pandemic. And on a global scale, he said he's ready to engage.
America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges.
Some of those challenges include the world of technology, where we could see major policy shifts on antitrust, Section 230, cybersecurity, the vaccine rollout, and U.S.-China relations. All will be shaped by the Biden administration. This hour, we will bring you conversations with the experts across the sector, including an early investor and now outspoken critic of Facebook, a former Obama administration cybersecurity advisor, and a co-founder and chair of Moderna, as well as a venture capitalist and China internet experts. Those conversations all in a moment. But first, on this very historic day for the country and the markets, you could feel President Biden trying to set a tone of hope, optimism, and of course that word unity, which we keep hearing from him. As his motorcade neared the White House, he got out of the car, fist-bumping well-wishers as he approached the executive residence. For the very first time, Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow was watching the markets from our San Francisco office. And Ed, certainly a moment here means something different to everyone. You, of course, from the UK. I wonder how you took in the day's events.
Yeah, scaled back in COVID-compliant inauguration, but I felt it really captured the spirit of what an inauguration is. You know, it covered a lot of the ceremony and bipartisanship that one would associate with the inaugurations of President Trump, President Obama, President George W. Bush that I witnessed from the UK. And as a number of the speakers pointed out, the world was watching. The messaging very light on policy, very focused on the challenges the country is facing, namely COVID and also social and economic issues as well. And it was really a message of optimism. And that optimism really reflected throughout financial markets on Wednesday. Most major US equity indices hitting fresh record highs. The S&P 500 up. Actually, the S&P 500 having its best inauguration day, its best first day of a presidency since 1937, which was when January the 20th was actually set as inauguration day. But some outperformance in technology stocks, and the NASDAQ 100 up around 2%, also hitting a fresh record. A part of that, the driver being positive earnings reports from the technology sector. You can see those big cap tech stocks, the New York FANG index, also up on Wednesday. One of the underperformers, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, a little softer by 0.3%. It's been trading at near records, treading water a little bit. One of the surprise, I guess, laggards of inauguration day, but not reading too much into that. The final place that I'm really looking at as well is Bitcoin. Bitcoin a little softer, hovering around 35,000 on Wednesday, but some pretty major news for the cryptocurrency, which is that BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, has made filings to add futures, cash-settled futures, to 2 of its investment funds. That's a real backing, a real vote of confidence in the cryptocurrency from a pretty major institutional player, but not really doing anything to support the cryptocurrency on Wednesday. A little lower, around 35,000, below that 40,000 mark that we've kind of been monitoring over the last 10 days, Emily.
All right, our Ed Ludlow from San Francisco. Ed, thanks so much for that analysis. President Biden beginning his presidency with a big promise and soaring appeal to end America's uncivil war and reset the tone in Washington. Those were the words coming from his inaugural address. Our David Weston, host of Balance of Power, with us now. David, we've been looking at live shots of the Senate floor, the new Senate on the floor. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has taken the helm. He said he feels hopeful, like this is a new chapter. But of course, the big question is, will this really be a new chapter? And can a President Biden really unite lawmakers and the country?
Well, as you suggest, Emily, it's a big, big task, and we'll see whether they can do that. Of course, Chuck Schumer is now majority leader, as you say, but it's a 50-50 split in the Senate, so it's not like they have a big majority. It's just Kamala Harris, the new vice president, who cast the deciding vote. They have a tall order. Certainly, most people who know Joe Biden well, and he's very well known in Washington, obviously, having served in the Senate for so long before he was vice president, say if there is a leader who could reach across the aisle, as they say, and really bring people together, it is Joe Biden. But there's a lot of fracturing in the country, without a doubt.
So we're waiting for President Biden to sign a few more executive orders, possibly this hour. What is the schedule for the rest of the day, and what is priority number one tomorrow?
Well, two different things. As you say, he's got a lot of executive orders that he has or will sign across a wide range of subjects, really to reverse a lot of what the Trump administration did, including that XL pipeline, for example, and things on immigration, on the wall, whatnot. One of the things that we do expect tonight is Jen Psaki, the press secretary, to come out and give the first briefing at 7 p.m. Eastern time is what it was predicted to be, which may be a real departure from what we saw under President Trump, because as you know, those press briefings were on again, off again. They have promised they're going to have regular briefings now where correspondents get to go in and ask questions. As far as tomorrow goes, I think the best thing we can do is look to what Mr. Biden, as president-elect and now as president, has said is his number one priority, and that is COVID-19. It is vaccination, it is testing and tracing, and I wouldn't be surprised if the next big moves we see would be that. We expect, or at least hope to hear from Jen Psaki later tonight, what his first 10 days are, what his plan is over those 10 days, because he's really focused on that as being the time he wants to change the direction for the country.
So, look, he's certainly trying to change the tone, but very quickly we're going to be having a Senate impeachment trial. You know, what do we know about how much of a distraction that will be and when that will actually begin?
Well, certainly he's concerned about it. You heard during the transition period him talk about it and say we really have to figure out a way that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Do business in the morning and then do different business in the afternoon to get things done. He's very concerned about it. We don't know yet when that trial will happen. We also don't know where Mitch McConnell, the former majority leader, now minority leader of the Senate, where he will come out on it. He said he hasn't decided yet. So that could be quite distracting. At the same time, getting that $1.9 trillion stimulus package through that he's announced, that'll be a big order of business. So they've got a lot of things to do all at once. And as you know well, Emily, Washington doesn't do more than one thing well at the same time. Typically, they have a tough time doing one thing. To do two or three things is almost impossible.
I just want to take a moment to underscore the fact that we now have a female vice president, the first Black, the first Asian vice president. So, David, no matter what your politics are, this is a moment Kamala Harris made history today. How do you expect, and she and President Biden have presented such a united team front, if you will. How do you expect they're going to communicate with the American people differently, using the tools now available to politicians like social media, and how differently will they do that than President Trump?
Well, such an important point. And we don't want to let the fact that Kamala Harris, as you say, the first woman, the first Black, the first Indian American to serve in the vice president or any federal office, really, nationwide federal office. It was an extraordinary moment that was noted by a number of people. But I would go beyond that. Just looking at what happened yesterday when now President Biden first went to Washington, the first place he went, before he went to Blair House, anywhere else, he went to the Lincoln Memorial and had that memorial service for the 400,000 people who have died from COVID-19. Today was full of symbolism. So one thing that has struck me throughout the day is that he's been pitch perfect in the symbolism. And I think that's part of the way he'll try to drive the country. Now, social media, I think two things. One is it won't be like President Trump. I don't think anybody can be like President Trump in his use of social media. But I don't think we should think it's going to go back the other way either. President Trump demonstrated something to the world about what can be accomplished for good or perhaps not for good through social media. And so we should expect some robust campaign. But one last point. The other thing besides unity that President Biden emphasized again and again in that inauguration speech was the difference between truth and lies, that we have to defend truth and really fight lies. It came up again and again and again. We have to get back to the facts. And it'll be interesting to see how he uses social media to try to get to what he understands to be the truth and, as he says, defend against lies.
Absolutely, and we will be covering that, of course. Bloomberg's David Weston, thank you so much, David, for your thoughts and analysis today. All right, coming up, our conversation with Elevation Partners Roger McNamee on big tech's relationship with Washington. What should we expect with the ongoing issues over antitrust and social media? His conversation next. This is Bloomberg. Whether it will be antitrust or the policing of social media, big tech has been under attack for some time now and from both sides of the aisle. So how will the relationship between Silicon Valley and Washington change under a Biden administration? I want to bring in Roger McNamee of Elevation Partners, who has some thoughts on this. Roger, what do you imagine will be different when it comes to the relationship between Silicon Valley and Washington under President Biden?
So to be clear, President Biden made it incredibly clear that his top priority is dealing with the pandemic and the economic issues that have come from a pandemic. I don't think he can avoid taking on tech reform, though, fairly early. And there are two reasons for that. First is the pandemic itself. One of our biggest obstacles is disinformation spread over social media platforms. So I think he's going to have to take the bull by the horns there. But secondly, the constituency that elected President Biden, so we're talking about women, Black people, and brown people, they have been the people most harmed by the malfeasance of Facebook, Google, Twitter, and the rest. And so as a consequence, I think that President Biden will owe it to the people who got him elected to really work hard to protect democracy, to protect public health, privacy, and competition, which are the things that have really been undermined by internet platforms.
Now, President Trump has been banned from Twitter permanently, from Facebook indefinitely, and I wonder how much you think Trump being gone will actually lead to more healthy conversation on these platforms. Of course, it is not that simple, but does removing him make a significant change in the conversation that is happening?
There was a report earlier in the week that shutting down Trump and QAnon pages and a couple of other things had led to a 73% decline in election-related disinformation online. You know, I think there are other factors. I'm not sure the numbers exactly something we should pay attention to, but I think directionally it's correct. Trump was one of a kind, and I think his impact on amplifying disinformation and hate and conspiracy theories is going to be hard to replicate. But the problem here, Emily, is that the business models of Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, Google, Twitter, you know, they are based on getting people emotionally engaged. And so hate speech, disinformation, conspiracy theories get amplified disproportionately. And that will continue to happen until there's regulation to change it. So I do think the Biden administration has its work cut out for it. I think it's great that Trump is off, but you know, he'll be replaced by many others who will get the benefit of that same amplification.
Now, President Trump in his final days in office didn't use the traditional avenues that were certainly available to him. He didn't talk to the reporters that were on the White House lawn. He didn't do a national televised address, but instead released a video message. And the silence has almost been deafening because he didn't have access to Twitter. He didn't have access to Facebook, which almost underscores and highlights the power these platforms have had in giving him that megaphone. Yeah. What would you like to see the Biden administration do on tech? How would you like to see the administration curb the power of these platforms?
So I think the platforms, and frankly, in partnership with the Republican Party and President Trump, have been playing with fire for 5 years, and it all blew up this past year, first with COVID and the COVID disinformation that happened, then with the election disinformation that happened, culminating in those things coming together to do the insurrection at the Capitol. You know, the Biden administration needs to recognize that there are three areas of regulation that are desperately needed. We need them all at the same time. We need safety, privacy, and competition. On safety, unique among all engineering disciplines, the people who make electronic technology have no standards of behavior, no code of conduct, no requirement that they anticipate and mitigate harm before it goes into the market. That needs to change. They need to have personal liability. They need to have corporate liability, both of those, for harms that they do, to change the incentives so that technology gets back to what it used to be, which was a source of personal growth and opportunity for people as opposed to something dangerous. On privacy, what's happened is the success of Google and Facebook and others has essentially resulted in manipulation of people. You've seen that 64% of the people who join an extremist group on Facebook do so because Facebook recommended that they join. And keep in mind, those are Facebook's own numbers. And so that means at least 2 million people joined QAnon because Facebook radicalized them. So that's got to stop because that's all based on data. So we need more privacy. We need to reduce the use of private data for economic gain. And then lastly, we need antitrust regulation to return to what it used to be when we protected markets so that no one could dominate and block new entrants, no one could compete against people operating in a marketplace, no one could beat up on their suppliers or their employees. All of those things are routine today, and not just in tech. That's an economy-wide problem. And the Biden administration needs to do something in all three areas. They need to do them all simultaneously. But the great thing, Congress is very advanced on its work on safety and very advanced on antitrust. Obviously, the Trump administration did a great job on antitrust relative to the previous ones. And so we're a long way down the path on antitrust there and at the state level. And then lastly, on privacy, California and the state of Washington have put in new privacy laws. But most important, Apple in the new version of iOS is going to opt in privacy, which means corporations must ask permission before using your data. That is exactly the right idea and needs to be implemented as a law across all businesses in all contexts. And I think they can do that. That's not going to require a lot of bandwidth from Biden or his team. You just need to encourage Congress to do it, and you need to make sure that the roadblocks are cleared out of the way.
All right, Roger, we're looking at some shots of President Biden signing some executive orders. These have to do with COVID, a mask mandate on federal property, as well as one to support underserved communities and having to do with equality. And the third, a committee about rejoining the Paris Accord. Let's listen in.
A lot of the things we're going to do. And the first order I'm going to be signing here relates to COVID, and it's requiring, as I said all along, where I have authority, mandating masks be worn, social distancing be kept on federal property and interstate commerce, etc. This is the first one I'm signing. And the second one I'm signing here is the support for underserved communities, and we're going to already make sure we have some bedrock equity, equality as it relates to how we treat people in health care and other things. We'll give you copies of these executive orders. And the third one I'm going to sign, and that's what I'm going to do while you're all here, is the commitment I made that we're going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord as of today.
President.
Thank you.
Mr. President. What did President Trump write to you?
You guys, let's go. Please, let's go.
The President wrote a very generous letter. It's because it was private. I will not talk about it until I talk to him, but it was generous.
Okay, guys, let's go. You guys, let's go.
To Brazil on climate change. You were rejoining Paris agreements, and you mentioned Brazil.
You guys, come on, let's go.
Do you have concerns about
Let's go, you guys. Press, let's go. Let's go.
Welcome to the White House.
Do you have any concerns about
You guys, let's go.
There you see President Biden taking care of some of the first orders of business, signing 3 different executive orders. The third one, possibly the most important, a commitment to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. Roger McNamee of Elevation Partners still with us. Roger, it's kind of incredible to see President Biden sitting in the Oval Office, being president and already making big changes. Do you believe that President Biden can actually unify this country?
Well, I think, Emily, there are huge challenges to do so, but that is his goal. That's his commitment. And I think most of the country, a majority of Americans want to work together to make the world a better place. And, I think as we get more distance from the Trump years, even people who used to support President Trump will begin to see that the kinds of name calling that took place, the kinds of harm done to children in cages at the border, all those sorts of things were, performative hate, and that there's no place in America for that kind of stuff. And I think that Biden is going to exemplify qualities that most Americans like to see in our country. And so I'm very hopeful that given time, he will do that. But he's got to be able to succeed against COVID, and he's got to be able to get the economy in a place where people are less stressed out, where there's less food insecurity, less housing insecurity. These are really hard problems, and I am hopeful that he will be incredibly successful with them. But, healing this country is not going to happen overnight, and I don't think anyone should expect that, but I don't think that we need to heal first. I don't think that's our first objective. I think our first objective is to get well medically, get well economically, and that the political things will take care of themselves after that.
The social network Parler, which has been a haven for some very extreme voices on the right, is showing signs of life now, Roger, with the help of a Russian technology firm. It's still not back in the Apple or Google App Store, but I wonder if you see Parler gaining strength or becoming a sort of dominant platform for conservative voices. Will another network emerge? Where does that movement go?
Can I be honest with you? I don't think that's going to turn out to be the question we need to focus on long term. I think it's the Parler story is so deeply tied in with Trump that there is this temptation to wonder what does happen next there. But I think longer term, we have to begin to imagine social media in a very different model than the ones put forward by Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Google and Twitter. There are lots of other ways to do it, and most of those ways are going to be much less harmful than what we have seen. And I think we just need to get used to the idea that whether it's Twitter or Parler, it doesn't really matter. There's a better way of doing that. Whether it's Facebook or MeWe, there's a better way of doing this. And, it's ways that sit there and ask the question of, what does it mean to be a community? What does it mean to have things that you care about? What are facts? I think you have to have an approach to the problem that's fundamentally different than the one that's in the marketplace today. And until we do something about monopolies, it's going to be really hard for alternatives to succeed. So we do need to have some government intervention to create the opportunity for 1,000 flowers to bloom.
What is the likelihood, Roger? We have about a minute left of a tech breakup. Do you think Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, will those companies be broken up in 4 years?
I would like to hope so. Well, 4 years, I don't want to put a time frame on it. I do think it is inevitable that we're going to see very significant antitrust action. The states are going to do it, whether the feds do it or not. And so I think investors should be overjoyed at that. The history of antitrust intervention in tech is one that it's triggered every major cycle, and it's worked out incredibly well for investors. And I think if we were to have that again, that would be great news. But the core thing is not to worry about the timing, but the direction. And yes, it's going to happen.
Roger McNamee, Elevation Partners, author of Zucked, of course. Roger, always good to have you here on the show. Thanks for helping us reimagine the future. All right, coming up, we're going to speak with the chair and co-founder of Moderna about the vaccine rollout. Can President Biden deliver on his promise, 100 million doses in his first 100 days in office? Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. California has surpassed 3 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, the most of any U.S. state and more than the reported infections in a number of European countries. Meantime, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said the city has to reschedule 23,000 vaccine appointments because of supply shortage, largely due to a shipment delay of Moderna vaccines. This as Bloomberg has learned that President Biden's team is increasingly worried that the pandemic is spiraling out of control, imperiling his promise to contain the outbreak. Joining us now for more, Moderna co-founder and chair Noubar Afeyan. He is also the founder and CEO of Flagship Pioneering. Noubar, Moderna is going to be a huge part of President Biden's ability to deliver on this big promise. What is the likelihood, given what you know, that he will be able to deliver 100 million doses in his first 100 days in office?
Well, Emily, thanks for having me here again. We believe that, at least on our side, the production, the quality checks, and the supply distribution capability exists for us to be able to play our part in meeting that objective. And so far, nothing we see discourages us from continuing to work hard to do that. But I think that the plans exist to do that, and the production systems are functioning according to our plans.
So the urgency has never been greater given the soaring cases and the fact that the vaccine is out there. It is available. It's just a matter of getting it. Give us a picture of your production rate. Will Moderna be able to hit its own targets, 100 million doses this quarter, 100 million next quarter?
Well, look, we can do only as much as we're able to do, in the sense that we haven't done this and nobody else has done this before. So in other words, nobody has gone from zero output of this particular type of product to what we hope by the end of this year will be 1 billion doses we will have produced. So it's important for us to understand that because that has not been done doesn't mean it can't be done. But because it hasn't been done, we can't just say, oh yeah, we've done this 100 times before. We are in uncharted territory as a globe. We're in uncharted territory medically, and we're in uncharted territory in terms of production and supply. And so what we can do is to plan, have backups, have various measures put in place to be able to detect any faults very early on and compensate for them. All of those systems are in place. They're functioning. But until we have done that, we won't be able to point to having already done it as a reason to believe, because it's being done for the first time. We think that 100 million doses as a objective in the coming couple of months, and then another 100 million by the end of the second quarter as our commitment goal with the U.S. is something that we feel we're on track to meet. Lots of variables can get in the way.
Now, the vaccine shortages in New York and elsewhere are scary. You've got people out there who've gotten a first dose who don't know if they'll get a second dose, and certainly folks who haven't gotten any vaccine yet at all. I know that the New York issue specifically don't have anything to do with Moderna. It's actually your distributor that had an issue with the ice packs. That said, how many doses do you know may have gone unused in the United States because of temperature issues?
I don't have that information, and that's not information that I think is going to be ready to come by, because we're dealing with hundreds and thousands of outlets and a distribution infrastructure that is being run by McKesson and is being coordinated by the group that has been working, our counterparts under General Perna. So I think what's really more important is that we are all learning at a very rapid pace. The various states are learning themselves how they can get better organized, better forecast. There are issues with storage, as you said. Unfortunately, there's 2 different vaccines out that have quite different handling and storage requirements. And so we're all going to have to kind of be ready to recognize that there will be things that we're doing that don't work perfectly well. And look, the frustration we all feel is a different kind of frustration than the fear that we all felt that we were completely vulnerable to the virus and there's nothing we could do about it. Now there's something we can do about it, and we have to get organized, and make sure enough time passes and enough experiences is accumulated so that we get better and better at doing this. We're going to look back at these days and say it was the first week, it was the third week, it was the fourth week, but at some point we are getting the trajectory, at least the learning experience is encouraging to us, and we're quite confident that if we all do what is within our power, we'll be able to get through this.
Now, there have been some allergic reactions to the Moderna vaccine in California. Any updates on a possible explanation for this or any safety issues that you've identified with this particular batch?
The company put out a statement, Emily, which is the extent of what we can say and what we know, and that is that that batch, of course, contains quite a large number of doses, a lot of which have already been administered with no such reports. There appears to be a single site in which those reports come from, and we have not yet, and the CDC and the Department of Health and Government has not yet had the opportunity to really drill down on what could be the contributing factors to a particular location, a particular administration, to cause this observation versus a lot or the particular handling of it. So we're looking at all possible root causes, which is what we would do in any such report, and as soon as we can make a determination, we will. I think it's out of an abundance of caution that the regulators, the administrators within the state of California took an approach of basically stopping using that particular lot, and we're hoping that we will be able to, as quickly as possible, figure out what this is due to, and hopefully get all of those lots available for people to receive the vaccine.
What is your understanding at this point of whether we will need a third booster shot? And I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm sure that you're planning to study this. Can you tell us what your plans are to examine that question?
There are many things that we will study, of which that's one of them as we go forward, because nobody really knows the degree to which the response that we're eliciting, which we know to be a very strong response given the design that we chose with 100 microgram doses administered twice, roughly a month apart, that is we know generates a very robust immune response. Whether in the fullness of time we conclude that a further boost would be useful, required, and if so, when, will be something that we'll study, and we'll study in the context of the other phenomena that are going on with various new strains coming online. And so this is something that inevitably, the good news is the scientific questions are known. The bad news is we're going to have to gather data to answer them. We're not going to be able to assert them. It's easier, Emily, as you know, to point out what might not work than to know what does work. And the latter has a very straightforward approach, which is called the scientific method. So we will ask the questions, design good experiments with our partners, and get answers as quickly as we can. That'll guide the next step, and the one after that, and the one after that.
Now, your firm, Flagship Pioneering, is funding a number of other fascinating technologies and efforts to fight COVID, therapeutics, certainly beyond the vaccine itself. What are you most excited about, and what do you think might have the most sort of critical impact on our ability to get this under control and save lives?
Well, Emily, the COVID started out by being a pandemic that we kind of in our minds just thought about as an epidemic that was bigger than we thought. But actually, as a pandemic, it's had such reach. So many people have been infected that as we're learning about the consequences of the disease, both to those who are currently infected, but also those who had severe bouts with the disease, survived, but now are living with the remnants of that disease, this is going to be a major health challenge on the planet for years, if not decades to come. So we need to separate out what we're doing to halt the disease now from what we will have to do to cope with either persistent versions of the disease coming back or the after effects. So we're working on all of that. We have companies, for example, that are using approaches to be able to use the microbes in our guts, which are very important in the way our immune system functions to be able to control and regulate the overstimulation of the immune system that we see in a lot of serious COVID cases, where our immune system basically becomes the problem, not just the solution. We have a number of companies in our portfolio that have been looking at understanding the exact immune responses that can control the disease so that we can elicit those and only those versus a broad kind of broad-based attack that could cause the downstream consequences. We have some companies that are perfecting ways to draw samples and be able to do much better testing. And so it goes on. This is going to be a multi-pronged effort, and we think this is going to be worked on for many years. And technology and science will help in many other ways than just a vaccine.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Noubar, for coming on the show so often to lift the veil and give the public a better understanding of what you all are doing behind the scenes. Moderna co-founder and chair Noubar Afeyan, really appreciate you taking the time to join us this Inauguration Day. All right, coming up, securing the White House in cyberspace. Our conversation with Kirsten Todd, managing director of the Cyber Readiness Institute and former cybersecurity advisor to President Obama, is coming up next. This is Bloomberg. Foreign interference is not a new issue. It is one that has faced this nation for decades. So how will the Biden administration handle its cybersecurity? What are they walking into? Let's bring in Kirsten Todd, managing director of the Cyber Readiness Institute, former cybersecurity advisor to President Obama. And Kirsten, of course, it's not just foreign interference we're concerned about. It is domestic interference as well, as we saw with the Capitol riots on January 6th. Give us the state of play here. What is the Biden administration walking into when it comes to the threat landscape in cyberspace?
Thanks, Emily. Thanks very much for having me on. Well, certainly we are in a very intense threat landscape. And to your point about the two issues regarding a foreign adversary and domestic extremism, the two issues that the Biden administration is facing is how to challenge foreign adversaries from an offensive and defensive perspective, and how to address social media and big tech. And from the first moment, and we're already seeing actions taken certainly today, priority number one is cleanup from the SolarWinds attack that happened via the Russian adversary. And that's a very difficult task right now because we need to remediate and operate on these systems simultaneously. And so all efforts are going to be focused on responding to that attack and making sure that we've addressed the vulnerabilities that have been exposed, and we're still figuring those out.
Meantime, you've got the very real issue that, this attack on the Capitol. I was driving on a highway in California and saw a billboard with the FBI asking for tips. A lot of that is unfolding online. What are, the folks in Washington doing right now to try to track that down? And are they equipped, and do they have the resources they need to do so?
Well, I think there are two issues in looking at what happened. It's certainly the role of big tech, and it's unfortunate that we needed an attack on our democratic institutions to bring home the power of social media companies and how they have been used in malicious ways. And one of the key priorities for the Biden administration is going to be to look at how do we address these issues. And there is an element of the 1996 Telecommunications Act called Section 230, which has essentially absolved social media companies from any responsibility that they have. And the key piece right now is to dispel the notion by the tech companies that they are the defenders of free speech. They've self-deputized themselves to defend the First Amendment, but we have to look at this more closely and understand that they have become part of our critical infrastructure. Whether you're talking about the elections or what happened on January 6th, they have an impact on the national and economic security of the nation, and they have to be brought into government and addressed and looked at just as we look at critical infrastructure. And that is going to be a priority, certainly, for this Biden administration.
So I'm sure you know a lot of the folks that the president has appointed and the folks who will be working across a number of these issues. How confident are you in the new team and in the transition that they've got all the information they need?
Well, it's two questions. It's I think certainly always in a transition, a transition team will say they've never really received the information that they need or that they want, and there were obviously additional stressors on this transition. Having said that, the leaders that are being brought into government, into the Biden administration to take on these issues, I think represent an impressive and stellar group of individuals that both have experience in government. They're not going to need a lot of time to figure out, where certain conference rooms are. They know how government works. But also they have engagement and relationships with the private sector. And we know certainly that there is really no fine line or clearly marked line between industry and government when it comes to protecting our nation, both physically and in the cyber realm. And so that knowledge, both of industry and government, and the respect and the trust of industry and government are critical. And the leaders that President Biden has identified so far for these roles certainly represent those capabilities and that expertise.
All right, Kirsten Todd, who advised President Obama on cybersecurity. Really important to hear your views on this. Thanks so much for joining us. Still ahead, President Biden begins his first day in the White House and will be drafted into continuing many of the initiatives of his predecessor, including the rising tension with China. We're going to talk about whether or not he will do that with a China-U.S. relations expert next. This is Bloomberg. President Biden's cabinet picks signal that the new administration appears to potentially want to continue some of Trump's hardline economic policies on China. Joining us now to discuss U.S.-China tension and what will change under a new president, especially when it comes to tech competition, Edith Young, general partner at Race Capital. So, Edith, the big question is Biden going to continue a hard line on China?
Well, one thing I do absolutely believe for sure that Biden will reset the China-U.S. relation, and I'm optimistic that he will approach China with dignity, honesty, humility, and it will really change the mood and the dialogue. So I'm optimistic. But one thing I do know for sure, he's definitely not going to tweet about foreign policy on a daily basis.
What does this mean for tech investors like yourself, investors who are, funding companies that depend on this relationship or are impacted by this relationship?
Yeah, I think, for the past 4 years, President Trump have sort of bring U.S.-China relations in a really strange place. So starting from the trade war, which started in July 2018, lasts for about 20 months and pretty much ended in COVID. And it's just in a place where you don't know exactly what the trade war did to help the American people. And I think President Biden have publicly said that the trade war really was a failure, and he really went about going after China in the wrong way. So, if we look at it as an investor point of view, regardless as exit, CV has been blocking all the M&A transaction or IPO. We see the New York Stock Exchange and the Treasury Department on a daily basis flip-flopping. Should we list Chinese companies, yes or no? To the point where trying to block operation for TikTok or trying to sanction Huawei. These things just nonstop for the past 4 years. So from an investor point of view, it hasn't been easy, but I do think that President Biden have brought in an experienced team, and the Secretary of State and the new trade representative, they all have a lot of China experience. So I think I look forward to what the change is going to be, but it's definitely not going to be easy, but at least the tone, and it's going to be a great reset.
Well, at the same time in China, the Chinese Communist Party has been cracking down on big tech. New investigations, for example, into big tech companies that have traditionally been given a lot of power. And I wonder how that changes the dynamic given how great the concern is about China's competitiveness in the tech industry and surpassing the United States on many fronts.
I do think that TikTok and being so successful in the U.S. absolutely was a shocking phenomenon for Facebook and Apple of the world. But at the same time, I think China, similar to U.S. government, right, worry about the big tech is going to dominate the conversation. It definitely was a huge disappointment that Ant Financial didn't get to go public, and I think Jack Ma been laying low with in light of what's happening. But at the end of the day, I think both countries are going through similar thing. We need to regulate the big platforms. We need to understand the impact in terms of financial ecosystem and social and communication. Big tech, seriously, their user base is bigger than any of these countries combined. So it's very understandable now Chinese government is trying to crack down. But at the same time, I think that the two world, Emily, you and I are not using Alipay or WeChat on a daily basis. And I think that will continue. And I think both ecosystems will not only survive and thrive, but in their own way.
Do you think this is the start of something new, a new era of cooperation, or will pride and old ways prevail?
I don't think the Biden administration will go about tackling China and the relationship the same way as President Trump. I do think that it won't be easy. It doesn't mean that they will be softened in any way, but I do think that at least on the trade war, they will go about it differently. I do think that the Biden administration will go hard on IP and various different human rights issues. That will continue, but at the same time, from a technology front or from a financial system or in trade, I do think that there will be a little bit different course and different path going forward.
All right, Edith Young of Race Capital, thanks so much for giving us that look ahead. So much to watch as President Joe Biden starts his term as the 46th president of the United States. As we have been speaking, we've learned that President Biden has signed all of his day one executive orders. He's got some additional business for the day, including swearing in the day one presidential appointees. We will be watching that. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Television. But that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia coming up next. This is Bloomberg.